Hello, dear students. Welcome to our class after some time. Shubho Vijaya to all of you. And let's begin with T.S. Eliot's Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. In the last class, we talked about some influences on Eliot, and we also talked about some issues of Eliot, and we focused on a few lines from the poem where we compared it with Dante's Inferno, and then we moved on with the poem. If you want to know more about Eliot's the influences on Eliot, then I would suggest you that you can look for a book by Dr. Chinmoy Guho. The name of the book is Where the Dreams Cross. This is a brilliant book where Dr. Guho has traced all the formative influences on T.S. Eliot. And if you want to know more, then you can focus on that book. At least look up, especially on his chapters on Jules Laforgue, Tristan Corbett, Julien Benda, and Remy de Gourmont. These four chapters would be very helpful for you. If you want to know more, that is. Otherwise, it's fine. So in the last class, we ended, if I remember correctly, on the basic fact that on the streets and the street scenario. So look, streets become an important modern metaphor because whereas the streets contain in them a moving imagery, the imagery of movement, the metaphor of movement, on the other hand, Prufrock is stagnated in his own psychological topography. So he says, let us go through certain half-deserted streets. I talked about why the streets are half-deserted. The muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. So why does he talk about the muttering retreats of restless nights? If you go to a crowded restaurant, you hear certain mutters because you cannot make out what the people are trying to say. You cannot make out the words, you only hear indistinct mutter. And in this mutter is actually more characteristic of our day-to-day conversations because there all of us are speaking and nobody is listening properly of what the other is trying to say. And in this jargon, in this polyphony of jargon, in this clamor and clatter of jargon, all that is said is lost. So muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels. So it's about the restless nights. And here I think that Eliot is referring to the one-night stands and all that are very common in today's world as well. So he's talking about the loss of love. He's talking about the loss of rest. If you remember your Shakespeare in Macbeth, where Macbeth is about to murder Duncan, and there he talks about sleep. But here there is this sleeplessness, which is characteristic of the modern age. One-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. Actually, what happened was that in the modern age, there were multiple restaurants which used to be on the low end of the street, and therefore there was a lot of whenever there was a rain, there was a lot of mud, and they would put down sawdust to level up the mud. So sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. Now look, oysters are a delicacy, and they are being sold in such cheap restaurants. So even the delicacy, the luxury has become a commodity. That's one point that Eliot focuses on. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. So this is a very Laforgian statement. Even if you read Matthew Arnold, there is a line like when he is walking on a moon-blanched island, he can hear the noise of his own lonely footstep. And this loneliness of one's own footsteps, that is what harps back us to Eliot. So streets that follow like a tedious argument. It's like one is arguing with oneself about one's own existence, about one's own being. Of insidious intent, insidious as in murderous intent. That is, we are killing ourselves each day, bit by bit, to fit into the discourse of society itself. To lead you to an overwhelming question. Now, what is this overwhelming question? Eliot does not answer there. For me, it might be something. For you, it might be something else. For a third person, it might be something else. So, this overwhelming question, although this is a reference to one text by J. Fenimore Cooper, where he was talking about this overwhelming question, which Eliot admired as a boy. So, there might be some reference to that, but simultaneously, what happens over here is that all of us are faced by certain overwhelming questions which are dependent on each of us. So my question is different than somebody else's, and somebody else's question is different than mine. And therefore he says, oh, do not ask what is it. Let us go and make our visit. So he suspends the question. He keeps the question hanging in the line for some time to make the visit, which is very important. Because ultimately the journey matters. And where is he going? As I told you the story, that he is going to a party room where there is a certain woman whom Prufrock wants to propose. So in the room, in that party room, women come and go talking of Michelangelo. And in that room, the women, they come and go. So they are not there to stay. So they come and go. So this eternal motif of limbo, coming and going, this eternal movement of limbo is where the modern society belongs. Talking of Michelangelo, so they are not speaking about Michelangelo, they are not discussing Michelangelo, but they are talking of Michelangelo. Now, Michelangelo, as we all know, was a Renaissance artist, sculptor, and a famous person. Now, look, over here something important happens. They are talking of Michelangelo, so this is some idle talk and not some thorough discussion. Number one, that is, this is their way of showing that they are part of the genteel society, they are part of the genteel discourse of the time. That is point number one. Point number two is, when they're talking about Michelangelo, they are actually focusing on them, on themselves being the elite, the intelligentsia of the time. I know Michelangelo so much that I can idly talk about Michelangelo. That is the attitude. Number three, Michelangelo was a Renaissance painter, sculptor, and an artist. There is, Michelangelo was one of the torchbearers of the Renaissance as we know it. Similarly, these women want to portray the modern age as the neo-Renaissance, where the women are actually becoming the torchbearers of the discourse of modernism. So, therefore, Michelangelo also becomes very interesting. And you know, Michelangelo drew up the human figurines. He made sculptures of human beings, and his way of dealing with the human body was very unique. And in the later stanzas, you will find that Eliot is dissecting a human being to understand his anatomy. And therefore, it becomes very interesting. That is, Michelangelo becomes a model on whom Eliot develops his own Prufrockian discourse. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. So now he talks about the yellow fog in a cat imagery, in a series of cat imageries. Now, cat is a very important being for Eliot because he wrote an entire book on cats. It's called Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats. which is a very interesting read if you have time. So the yellow fog, why does he call the fog yellow? Because it is not fog, it is what we call in the modern parlance smog. Smoke plus fog, that is, it represents an industrial area. Many of you have seen Peaky Blinders and you know what is smog. So the yellow fog that rubs its back, so just like a cat rubs its back, the yellow fog is rubbing its back upon the window panes. And why the color yellow? Because yellow is the color of disease, it's the color of paleness. And it talks about the entire diseased existence, just like the ether of the previous stanza. Here, the yellow fog talks about the diseased existence of the modern times. It rubs its back upon the window panes. So the windows are closed, so people are content in their claustrophobic confinements. And on the window panes, as if the yellow fog, the diseased existence of the modern times, is rubbing its back just to knock at the gates, at the window panes, to call forth everybody out of their window panes. The yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle as in this part of the cat, the wet nose, its muzzle on the window panes. So the smoke is behaving just like a cat does. And look, yellow fog, then comes yellow smoke. So he kind of tells us that this is the foggy existence. This is the existence of uncanny, of this uncanny existence becomes very important. Because you see, it creates a lot of anxiety. Now, writing in 1921, Sigmund Freud wrote an essay called The Uncanny. And in that essay, it's 1921 perhaps, as far as I remember. I have forgotten the year. I'm very bad with years. So please check up the year. Okay. Sigmund Freud wrote an essay called The Uncanny. And in that essay, Freud talks about the uncanny is an encounter with anxiety. So it is whatever makes you anxious. The modern existence is an existence of angst, of ennui, of anxiety. And this anxiety is being projected outwards. If I am to quote T.S. Eliot, this is an Eliotian concept. This is an Eliotesque concept called the objective correlative. What is the objective correlative? The objective correlative is very simple. Let me divide it in two parts. Let me give an example. It becomes very interesting and very simple. Imagine you are going to college. Okay, or say you have come, you are going to college, and the previous night, the previous day, when you came back, you did not keep your shoes properly. So in the morning, when you are going to college, your mother looks at your shoes and she yells, "Why did you keep your shoes like this?" And you are in a very grumpy mood. You had a quarrel with your mother, you are in a very grumpy mood. Now, on the street, say you have seen a pickpocket getting caught, and everybody is beating the pickpocket. Okay. Or there is a lot of clamor regarding the pickpocket. Now, what happens is that according to the Aristotelian theory, you get a catharsis. You stand there, you watch it, and you get a catharsis. That is, you get purified, you get purgated from your feelings. This is step one. Step two is, say, after 6 months or 8 months, you see another pickpocket getting harassed by the people. And then you remember that, okay, that day I had a quarrel with my mother. So whenever that same thing repeats itself, that external thing repeats itself, you are at once reminded of that feeling, that thought. All right. So basically what happens over here is that first, it is the external projection of your internal thoughts. Secondly, whenever those external projections repeat, you are reminded of this thought itself, Okay, so that is called objective correlative. That is, whatever you can correlate objectively outside yourself. So licked its tongue into the corners of the evening. So imagine, in the last class we were talking about when the evening is spread out against the sky. So the evening was dripping from the canvas corners, and now as if the cat is licking those extra colors and keeping the contours of the evening intact. Lingered upon the pools that stand in drains. a very common day-to-day experience. That is when the drains are clogged and there's a pool of water, and as if the cat lingered upon it, that as if the smoke lingered upon it. Let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys. So in the West, they have chimneys where they burn uh, coal and firewood to create warmth, and the chimney soot is falling upon the cat's back, just like it's almost like snowing. Slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, just like a cat does, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. It's as if the smoke persists, the smog persists, the fog persists, and it sleeps like a cat throughout the visible territory. And indeed, there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides along the street, rubbing its back upon the window panes. There will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. So basically, look, what happens is that he says there will be time. Now, many of you have read Andrew Marvell's To His Coy Mistress, and there the lover tells the beloved that there is no time. Had we but world enough and time, this coyness lady were no crime. But Prufrock believes that there will be time. So this is in a kind of a mocking antithesis to Marvel's assertion, where Marvel's lover is more practical. He knows that there is no time. Prufrock is a great procrastinator, and he thinks, okay, there will be time. So he says, there will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. Here he is echoing Shakespeare. All the world's a stage, and we are the players. So similarly, we put on different masks, just like Eliot is putting on the mask of Prufrock. And he's talking about the modern predicament of the modern man. Similarly, he suggests that there will be time to prepare a face, to put on the mask, to meet the faces, that is, the masks that you meet. So all of us are wearing different masks, and these masks become important because we are hanging on to these masks, and we are the masks that we wear. There will be time to murder and create, and time for all the works and days of hands. This is that lift and drop a question on your plate. Now, you see, we murder and create different selves just to reinforce, reinstate our existence in itself. This is a reference actually to one poem by Hesiod. Okay, Hesiod was an ancient Greek poet who has a poem called Works and Days. It contains an account of primitive conditions of the country, together with maxims and practical instructions adapted to the peasant's life. So basically, this uh, reference is to the way of life of modern age. Time for all the works and days of hands. So there will be time. Prufrock, the great procrastinator, thinks that there will be time, and he is enmeshed with the entire concept of time itself. That lift and drop a question on your plate. So it's almost like the way we are served food. Similarly, we are served as a question. And you know, food is the basic necessity of sustaining human life. Similarly, a question, the fundamental question, the overwhelming question that Eliot talks about, is actually the basis, the rudiment of human intellectual existence, of human philosophical existence. Time for you and time for me, and time yet for 100 indecisions and for 100 visions and revisions before the taking of a toast and tea. So There will be some time for you, there will be some time for me. And time yet for 100 indecisions and for 100 visions and revisions. So we are suffering. Prufrock is basically suffering from a syndrome of indecision. And it is his indecisiveness which causes all his problems. He is circling regarding the same question, regarding the same issue. He's circling surrounding the same issue. And he is not moving forth or moving back, but he is in a limbo, he is in a trance, he is in a closed loop where he is circling around the same place repeatedly. And I made for 100 indecisions and for 100 visions and revisions. So his life is all about visions and revisions before the taking of a toast and tea. So taking of a toast and tea is a trivial business of the party, of the kitty party. But before that, there will be time for 100 indecisions, visions, and revisions. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. Now, here I would like to draw your attention to one poem uh, by Jules Laforde. The poem uh, mentions, it's in French, the poem mentions, in the room, the women come and go, talking of the masters of the Sienese school. And Eliot creates a parody by maintaining the rhyme. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. So Eliot was borrowing, he was assimilating. You know, Remy de Gourmand, why I mentioned Remy de Gourmand at the beginning of the class, is that Remy de Gourmand, in his book Le Problème du Style, The Problems of Style, in that book, Remy de Gourmand suggests one thing. He says that a great poet is allowed to beg, borrow, or steal as long as he can assimilate that. And Eliot himself once jokingly said, good poets borrow, great poets steal. So his poetry in itself can often be and has often been seen as a web of quotations. So they are always polyvocal, polyglot. And indeed, there will be time to wonder, do I dare? And do I dare? So the Prufrock is suffering from a lot of indecisions, from a lot of dilemma. And this dilemma is reiterating itself in his expressions. Do I dare? Do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair. So he was getting up the stairs, and then he suddenly, the question pops up, do I dare? Do I dare? And he gets down the stair with a bald spot in the middle of my hair. So there's a bald spot in the middle of his hair. And then he says in parenthesis, as he's wondering what would people say, the thing that keeps us Indians alive, log kya kahenge. The same thing goes on over here. And he says, they will say how his hair is growing thin. So Prufrock is a middle-aged man and his hair is growing thin. So he's worried that the people would say how his hair is growing thin. So they would poke fun of him. They would make fun of him, they would poke fun at him. And that makes him acutely conscious of his own limitations. And that increases, that intensifies his own dilemma. My morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin, my necktie rich and modest, but asserted by a simple pin. They will say, but how his arms and legs are thin. So Prufrock has quite the dressing sense. He's simple, not very exuberant, but he has a certain grandeur about himself. And despite that, people would say that how his arms and legs are getting thin. So he is almost suffering the indecision itself. Do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute there is time for decisions and revisions which a minute will reverse. So look, Prufrock understands that the society, the atmosphere that we belong to, that becomes our universe. That is our surrounding universe. And if we disturb the status quo of that universe, that changed status quo would affect us in a very difficult way. It would affect us in one way or the other. It will affect us. It is bound to affect us. For instance, say you have certain feelings for your friend, and you say it to him or her, and then that person says, no, no, I never saw you like that, and in the process your friendship gets ruined. So therein lies the problem, that is, your universe is disturbed in a way. So do I dare disturb the universe? Because in a minute there is time. So if I think for 1 minute more, maybe I won't disturb the status quo of the universe, the equilibrium of the universe. For decisions and revisions which a minute will reverse. Now, I would ask you uh, to do one thing. I hope you have the poem. Now, in the previous stanza, read the last three lines and time it for 100 indecisions and for 100 visions and revisions, right? And here we once again have in the last line for decisions and revisions which a minute will reverse, right? Now, use a pencil and connect the indecisions of the previous stanza with the decisions of this previous stanza, and connect the visions with the revisions. Previous stanza has the word visions, and this stanza has the word revisions. Connect that. So you will get a cross, an imperfect cross. This is the imperfect cross that Prufrock is carrying. Christ carries the perfect cross. Now, Prufrock, as every man, and Prufrock as the modern Christ, is carrying his own imperfect cross. You can also add the word revisions with reverse. That will also function, no problem. But then you will get a parallel line, almost parallel line. So Prufrock carries the cross, and Prufrock runs almost parallelly as well. So sometimes his thoughts come to a crossroads, sometimes they run parallelly. And it is in this duality that Prufrock has to dwell. Prufrock is the duality personified. For I have known them all already, known them all. I have known the evenings, mornings, afternoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. So look, for I have known them all, already known them all. So he has known his universe already, the components of his universe already. Now look, Macbeth, when he was suffering his dilemma, he said, let the frame of things disjoint. Similarly, Prufrock here disjoints the frame of things for himself. And look the order in which he says, evenings, mornings, afternoons. So there is no chronological development. It should have been evenings, nights, mornings, or mornings, afternoons, evenings. But no, Prufrock says evenings, mornings, afternoons, as if he is omitting the night with its experience of sleepless night, because the night is sleepless. He's almost omitting it, number one. Number two is that he is disjointing his frame of experience because he knows that within himself he has disturbed his own universe. And therefore, that disturbance finds an expression in the disjointed existence that Prufrock resides in. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. This is a very problematic issue because I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. Here he both mentions that uh, in a way he is uh, trying to stay uh, awake because of the sleeplessness of the nights. He's trying to stay awake with coffee. One thing. Secondly, what I feel is that he suggests that his life has become so uneventful and so indistinct that it can be measured out with coffee spoons. So, as trivial a thing as a coffee spoon is enough to mention the life that is left in him. And in four quartets, Eliot writes a beautiful series of lines. Where is the life we have lost in evening? Where is the life we have lost in living? Where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge we have lost in information? The same thing echoes over here. I know the voices dying with a dying fall beneath the music from a further room. So how should I presume? So now look, this is an echo of William Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, where the play begins with Orsino. If music be the food of love, play on. And there Orsino hears the dying fall of the musical notes. Similarly, Prufrock can hear the dying fall of the musical notes, but instead of musical notes, here he has voices. So the voices are in the next room and they're dying with a dying fall, as if when he enters, everybody has stopped talking and everybody is focusing on him. And it is this uncomfortable existence, it is this uncomfortable gaze which creates a lot of problems for Prufrock himself. So, how should I presume? Then, how should he presume that the lady would accept his love? How should he presume? How should he begin? How should he begin to talk about his love? How should he begin to think? How should he presume that what he is supposed to say, and how should he presume that people would accept what he has to say? And I have known the eyes already, known them all. So look, there's a pun. I have known the eyes, as in I. I have known the eyes, and I have known the eyes, known them all. I have known all the persons, and I have known how their eyes function when they see you. You'll see that people can lie to you on your face, but their eyes usually don't. The eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase. And when I am formulated sprawling on a pin, when I am pinned and wriggling on the wall, then how should I begin to spit out all the buttons of my days and ways? And how should I presume? Now, uh, this is a very interesting reference. The reference is to Alexander Pope's The Rape of the Lock, where you see Ariel when he is talking to the other sylphs and he is giving them their duties, and he is also uttering that what are the punishments that he will give if the sylphs fail to perform their duties properly. There he says that some sylphs would be pinned to the wall, and underneath them will be fuming chocolate, hot chocolate. Similarly, over here, what happens is that he says the eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase. So we have in our mind an idea of someone. Say that guy, okay, he's a bad guy. That person, okay, he's a good guy. That person, oh, he's not that good. So we have formulated phrases. We have names for everybody in our head. So eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase. And when I'm formulated sprawling on a pin, when I'm pinned and wriggling on the wall, then how should I begin? So Prufrock says, with the people's gazes, I'm formulated, I'm fixated on a wall. Then how should I begin to spit out the buttons? Buttons as in the cigarette butts. Then how should I begin to spit out the buttons of my days and ways? And how should I say that this is what I do? These are my days and ways. And once again, look, he's harking back to the days and ways of Hesiod. And how should I presume? So once again, look, he's going on into that limbo. He's circling. And I have known the arms already, known them all. Arms that are braceleted and white and bare, but in the lamplight downed with brown hair. So, and I have known the arms already, known them all. Both arms and arms. So it's Prufrock's own arms and the man. So the ladies who are so very beautiful, and they have such beautiful arms. Look at the sensuous, the voluptuous expression that Eliot gives. So I have known the arms already, and those arms are like arms to slay Prufrock. So known them all, arms that are braceleted and white and bare. This is a reference to a poem by John Donne called The Relic. Uh, the poem is very interesting. It begins with these lines. I've forgotten the entire poem. I used to remember it. When my grave is opened up again with some new guests to entertain. So basically, the tale is like that. That there is a girl who has a lot of suitors, and they somehow die. And when each of them dies, they are put in on the same grave. And how do they know each other? Because that girl, she gives each of them a curl of her hair as a bracelet, and that's how they know each other. So when these dead bodies they meet each other, they can understand. Okay, they love the same girl. So arms that are braceleted and white and bare, but in the lamplight downed with light brown hair. You must realize that this was the time when the sepia format had come. And sepia has a sense of nostalgia, has a sense of beauty about it, a charm about it, old world charm about it. And therefore, the Madonna with the brown halo was the modern go-to look for beauty. If you have seen Marilyn Monroe's pictures, then you will see that how she was portrayed. So, or Audrey Hepburn for that matter. But in the lamplight, downed with light brown hair. So, as if those arms are under the lamplight and they're downed with light brown hair from the head. Is it perfume from a dress that makes me so digress? You see, in the West, uh, you'll see that in English poetry, olfactory images are very rare. And Prufrock says, is it the perfume from the dress which makes me so digress? So I had come here to propose the lady, but I am indulging in a voluptuous appreciation of the lady's beauty. Arms that lie along a table or wrap about a shawl. And should I then presume? And how should I begin? So Prufrock is going deeper into the dilemma, and he's almost splitting into to be or not to be. He's dwindling in the limbo of the Hamlet syndrome. To be or not to be, that is the question. That becomes the overwhelming question for Prufrock. Shall I say? I have gone at dusk through narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt sleeves leaning out of window. So he says that how should I begin the conversation? You see, the art of conversation is very important. How to begin a conversation? The way you begin a conversation that determines your audience, that determines your impact on your audience. So he says that shall I say it? Should I begin like this? I have gone at dusk through narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt sleeves leaning out of windows. So there is a very picturesque description in these lines. So he has gone through narrow streets where he has met some lonely men who are leaning out of the windows with pipes, and they're in their shirt sleeves. That is, they are not wearing coats, they're not wearing their jackets. So basically, these are men who have either lost work or they have returned from home after the work and they are in their casuals and they are smoking a pipe. Now the pipe becomes a phallic symbol because these men are lonely. Why are they lonely? Because maybe they're unmarried, maybe they're divorced, maybe their women are at the offices working and therefore they are lonely. And the pipe becomes a phallic symbol through which they reinstate their identity, their masculine identity, leaning out of windows as if they are kind of reaching out with their own smoke to mix with the yellow fog and the yellow smoke. So over here, for the first time, we have a connection between man and nature. That is city nature, urban nature. And then he sees that no, that is not a good way to begin. And then he becomes so very flustered. He says, I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. Now, he compares himself to a crab, a pair of ragged claws, that is the crustacean's claws, scuttling across the floors of silent seas. So I should have been a pair of ragged claws who were scuttling as in the crab's movement, the sideways movement. There is the crab can evade all these situations by moving sideways, but Prufrock cannot. Floors of silent seas. So comparatively, the seabed is calmer than the sea surface, and Prufrock can understand. And it's the reverse with Prufrock. Apparently, on the outside he's calm, but in the inside there's a lot of turbulence going on. So he says that I should have been like a crab who can scuttle across the bed of the silent seas so I can evade all these issues. So here I stop today. If you have any questions, this video will be there in my YouTube channel. You can ask the questions over there and I will be happy to discuss, answer whatever you want. Alright, so until the next class, have a good time. Have a great day. Thank you all.